A rapidly intensifying and multifaceted conflict between the United States, Israel, and the Islamic Republic of Iran has formally entered its seventh continuous day, mutating into a sprawling regional conflagration that threatens to permanently alter the geopolitical architecture of the Middle East while sending profound shockwaves through the global economic system and international diplomatic corridors. Initiated less than a week ago, under the aegis of the Joint Military Campaign, designated Operation Epic Fury, the offensive fundamentally destabilized the Iranian regime following the unprecedented assassination of Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, in a precision strike on his compound in Tehran, creating a massive leadership vacuum that the country's 88-member Assembly of Experts is now frantically attempting to fill via emergency meetings of a newly formed leadership council that includes President Masoud Pezeshkian and Judiciary Chief Ghulam Hossein Mohseni, EJ. As Tehran reels from the sudden decapitation of its top echelon, the Israeli military apparatus, commanded by Lieutenant General Eyal Zamir, has officially declared the commencement of a new phase of the war, characterized by a dramatic and sustained escalation in offensive operations designed to systematically dismantle what remains of Iran's military infrastructure, air defense grids, and ballistic missile production capabilities. Early Friday morning, the Israel Defense Forces launched a massive, broad-scale wave of aerial bombardments, explicitly targeting deeply buried ballistic missile launchers and strategic regime assets within the Iranian capital, with local journalists and residents reporting heavy, continuous shelling reverberating across eastern Tehran and the strategically vital Parchin military base, forcing thousands of terrified civilians to flee toward the city's central districts to escape the relentless inferno. Concurrently, the theater of operations has violently expanded westward into Lebanon, where Israel has effectively shattered a fragile ceasefire by unleashing a devastating series of airstrikes upon the densely populated southern suburbs of Beirut, successfully eliminating Zaid Ali Juma, a high-ranking Hezbollah commander responsible for the militant group's firepower management and artillery operations, prompting Hezbollah to retaliate with a relentless barrage of rockets aimed at Israeli military barracks in the occupied Golan Heights and naval facilities in Haifa. The sheer scale of the American military commitment to this conflict has been starkly illuminated by the aggressive actions of the United States Central Command, under the leadership of Admiral Brad Cooper, the 2 Faye, who confirmed that American B-2 stealth bombers have been deployed to drop dozens of massive 2,000-pound penetrator munitions on fortified Iranian bunkers, while the maritime domain has witnessed some of the most dramatic and unprecedented naval combat since the Second World War. U.S. forces have ruthlessly targeted the Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy, successfully sinking over 30 Iranian vessels in a matter of days, culminating in a spectacular strike that set ablaze a massive Iranian drone carrier ship, roughly the size of a World Tour-era aircraft carrier, completely neutralizing a critical node in Tehran's asymmetric warfare capabilities. Furthermore, in a deeply controversial and highly escalatory maneuver that has drawn international condemnation from Iranian allies, United States Secretary of War Pete Hegseth confirmed that an American submarine prowling the depths of the Indian Ocean deliberately fired a torpedo that struck and completely sank the IRS Dena, an Iranian frigate that was returning from multinational naval exercises, plunging the vessel into the ocean off the southern coast of Sri Lanka, resulting in the tragic deaths of at least 80 Iranian sailors and leaving another 150 missing at sea. A catastrophic loss that Iranian Deputy Foreign Minister Saeed Khatibzadeh fiercely condemned as a blatant violation of international law during a diplomatic visit to India. This unprecedented level of direct military confrontation marks the explosive culmination of decades of simmering proxy warfare, nuclear brinkmanship, and diplomatic hostility between Washington and Tehran, fundamentally rewriting the strategic calculus of the entire Middle East. The sheer audacity of the American and Israeli operational tempo has caught many international observers by surprise, particularly the rapid and systematic degradation of Iran's vaunted anti-access and area denial capabilities, which military analysts previously believed would exact a much higher toll on invading forces. The involvement of allied nations has also added complex layers to the unfolding drama, as Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese confirmed that 3 Australian defense personnel were actively stationed aboard the very United States submarine responsible for the torpedoing of the IRS Dena, an integration resulting from the AUKUS security pact that threatens to draw Canberra deeper into the geopolitical fallout of the Middle Eastern war. In the face of this overwhelming technological and numerical superiority, the Iranian regime has stubbornly refused to capitulate, with Foreign Minister Abbas Araki emphatically rejecting any notion of a ceasefire or diplomatic negotiations with Washington, instead opting to unleash a desperate, multifaceted, and geographically indiscriminate retaliatory campaign utilizing its remaining arsenal of ballistic missiles and suicide drones. This desperate counteroffensive has seen Iranian projectiles light up the night skies over Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, while simultaneously triggering air raid sirens and frantic interceptions across the Arabian Peninsula, fundamentally threatening the stability of America's closest regional allies. The Saudi Arabian Ministry of Defense was forced to activate its air defense networks to intercept and destroy 3 hostile drones approaching the eastern perimeter of the capital city of Riyadh, while the Kingdom of Bahrain suffered direct material damage when an Iranian missile strike inexplicably targeted 2 civilian hotels and a residential apartment complex in the heart of Manama, an attack that followed closely on the heels of a separate Iranian strike that ignited a significant blaze at Bahrain's primary state-owned oil refinery. The sprawling tentacles of Tehran's retaliation have even reached the massive Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, which houses up to 10,000 American military personnel and serves as the logistical nerve center for U.S. operations in the region, forcing Qatari air defense forces to scramble and successfully intercept an incoming Iranian suicide drone, while the United Arab Emirates has reported the detection of nearly 200 ballistic missiles and over 1,000 drones since the conflict began, resulting in civilian casualties and forcing the temporary suspension of aviation operations across the Gulf. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization has been forced to significantly elevate its defensive posture across the region, maintaining a heightened state of ballistic missile defense readiness after a stray Iranian projectile entered the airspace of alliance member Turkey, underscoring the ever-present danger that a single miscalculation could trigger mutual defense clauses and plunge the broader European continent into the fray. The indiscriminate nature of Iran's drone operations was perhaps most alarmingly demonstrated when 2 unmanned aerial vehicles veered wildly off course and crashed into the sovereign territory of Azerbaijan, striking the terminal building of the Nakhchivan airport and a nearby school, wounding innocent civilians and prompting an infuriated government in Baku to immediately summon the Iranian ambassador to deliver a severe diplomatic démarche and demand an explanation for the unprovoked violation of its airspace. The diplomatic isolation of Iran is becoming increasingly pronounced as traditional allies and neutral observers scramble to distance themselves from the escalating violence, while European nations like Italy have pledged to deploy advanced air defense systems to safeguard vulnerable Gulf states from the relentless barrage of Iranian suicide drones. As the physical destruction mounts, the humanitarian catastrophe accompanying the violence has reached horrifying proportions, with the United Nations Children's Fund issuing a desperate warning that the conflict is exacting an unbearable toll on the region's most vulnerable populations, verifying the deaths of nearly 200 children across Iran, Lebanon, Israel, and Kuwait in just the first 6 days of fighting. While the Iranian Red Crescent Society reports that over 3,000 residential homes have been severely damaged or completely destroyed within the Islamic Republic alone. Compounding the misery of the Iranian populace is the regime's draconian effort to maintain absolute control over the domestic narrative, as authorities have implemented a near-total nationwide communications blackout, severely throttling internet connectivity to a mere 1% of its normal capacity and sending ominous, threatening text messages directly to the mobile phones of citizens who dare to utilize virtual private networks to bypass the state's digital Iron Curtain. The catastrophic ripple effects of this strategy are most acutely felt by the civilian populations caught in the crossfire, particularly in Lebanon, where the unraveling of the November 2024 ceasefire has resulted in the mass displacement of over 83,000 residents fleeing the southern border regions as Israeli forces and Hezbollah militants exchange increasingly devastating blows. The Lebanese Health Ministry has warned that the nation's already fragile medical infrastructure is buckling under the strain of continuous casualties, while international aid organizations issue dire pleas for humanitarian corridors that remain ignored amid the deafening roar of airstrikes and artillery barrages. Against this backdrop of soaring violence and human suffering, the geopolitical ramifications are rippling aggressively through the corridors of power in Washington, D.C., where President Donald Trump recently secured a crucial domestic political victory when the United States Senate narrowly voted down Or Power's resolution by a margin of 47 to 53, effectively defeating a bipartisan effort aimed at legally curtailing the administration's ability to wage an undeclared war, thereby emboldening the president to publicly declare the military campaign a resounding success, while simultaneously floating the bizarre suggestion that his administration intends to swiftly finish the Iranian regime before abruptly pivoting its geopolitical focus toward an unspecified project involving the island nation of Cuba. Meanwhile, the internal political dynamics within the United States reveal a deeply polarized electorate, with public opinion polls indicating strong approval for the military strikes among Republican voters and military veterans, contrasted sharply by vehement opposition from Democratic constituents who fear the administration lacks a coherent, long-term exit strategy and risks embroiling the nation in another endless Middle Eastern quagmire. The severe and immediate economic consequences of the conflict are already being profoundly felt across global energy and financial markets, driven primarily by paralyzing fears that the ongoing maritime hostilities will permanently sever the vital flow of crude oil through the Strait of Hormuz, a critical maritime choke point that Iran's elite Revolutionary Guards audaciously claim to have completely blockaded, severely reducing international tanker traffic and sending benchmark oil prices surging higher, while global equity markets tumble into the red, in a frantic 11th-hour maneuver designed to mitigate an impending global supply shock and stabilize spiraling energy costs. And the United States Treasury Department, under the direction of Secretary Scott Bessent, announced the implementation of a highly specific temporary 3-0 sanctions waiver explicitly authorizing Indian petroleum refiners to purchase massive quantities of Russian crude oil that is currently stranded aboard tankers at sea, a pragmatic yet geopolitically fraught concession intended to ensure that critical energy resources continue flowing into the global market, despite the escalating chaos radiating from the Persian Gulf, underscoring the delicate and highly volatile interconnectedness of the modern global economy as the world watches the Middle East descend further into an unpredictable and ruinous abyss.